Welcome to the Autism Grown Up podcast, a podcast to help you wherever you are to begin with adulthood in mind. I'm Dr. Tara Regan, an autism researcher, coach, and big sister to two adult brothers on the autism spectrum. For the last 10 years, I've helped people on the autism spectrum, their families, and professionals from around the world navigate their day-to-day lives and work, and in that time, I've watched countless smart, brave, and capable people feel overwhelmed, underprepared, and totally stressed out by the cliff after high school. I believe that we can build our own bridges to adulthood and that you don't have to settle for just getting by. That's why each week I'm here to help guide and support you as you create or help create a life and work experience that actually nurtures and develops your potential and the autistic adult in your life's potential through knowing yourself, strategies, and support. Thanks for joining us. Today in episode 4, we'll be talking about using peer strategies in the classroom and ways to generalize that to the home and community. So we'll be talking about the types of peer strategies you can use, tips to implementing so everybody benefits, and ways to generalize across settings. So for those of you not familiar with peer strategies, well, it's kind of all in the name, right? It's ways to include peers with and without disabilities to spend time working on skills, spending time engaging in different tasks or activities with your student or child on the autism spectrum, or teen or autistic adult in your life. And we'll get into those age spans in just a second. So as we know, one of the main characteristics of autism is social communication challenges. And as we have spent more time working with our students and spending more time with our children, we know that they can really benefit from working with peers. And I would also say it's vice versa for peers too. They can really benefit from spending time with our students and children on the autism spectrum. So peer strategies falls under, I can't believe I said it like that, under a umbrella evidence-based practice called peer-mediated instruction and intervention. And this is one of the 27 evidence-based practices for autism identified by the National Professional Development Center on Autism Spectrum Disorders out of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And this is one of the 27, I think they're up to 27 now, video modules that they've created for each of the evidence-based practices that you can spend more time in, check it out, delve deeper into this topic, because I'm going to touch on a few of the informal ways that you can use peer strategies. But if you're like ready to nerd out on it, go for it. It's a free resource. I love it personally. I use it coaching with my teachers and it's amazing. So under this umbrella of peer-mediated instruction and intervention, or PMII as we like to call it in my research study, is that it involves a variety of areas, including peer modeling, peer initiation training, and direct training. So those are more of the formalized aspects of peer-mediated instruction and intervention. I should just call it PMII because I will just blend all of those words together. But the two main ones I want to get into today are peer networks and peer supports. And ultimately, the goal of peer strategies, I should mention, is that they are, for teaching peers without disabilities, a system of engaging individuals on the autism spectrum in positive and meaningful social interactions. So that's where the modeling comes into place. That's where spending time in a positive space is so important here as a critical component of peer-mediated instruction and intervention. So what are peer networks and what are peer supports? It's taken me a while to really figure out and remember which one is which, but I hope I'll have like a handy dandy way for you to remember them. So a peer network I like to think of this as like a social network, kind of like social networking, social media. It's really easy to get onto because it's also really easy to create in either the classroom setting or outside of it, which is more of the way I've seen it commonly used. So peer networks are a time where you, as a adult or staff member or teacher at your school, you create times and facilitate meetings for peers to interact with your target student on the autism spectrum. I've also seen as many as 2 to 3 students included, but it's always nice to start with one. I've seen these in terms of a lunch bunch setup here, or an after-school activity, or even something before school if students are around breakfast time. And they are often there. I've seen them implemented from elementary school to middle school to high school settings, and they just give such great opportunities for peers and students on the autism spectrum, they're also peers, to join a peer group with a little bit of structure if there's needed, but it typically is just a fun, positive, meaningful social setting for everyone to get involved with. We usually just have a game or a warm-up activity or an icebreaker type of thing that just encourages conversation to go, and it's really only like minimum 15 minutes up to 30 minutes. And I've seen this used from like 1 day to 2 days a week to every day, every week. But I would ideally start out with 1 to 2 times a week to kind of get a routine going. So have it always like on Monday afternoons, or Thursday at lunchtime is when we have our lunch bunch meeting. And you can create the space in your classroom, or if you don't have a classroom and want to make it more of a natural setting, you can use just a part of the cafeteria or an eating space that is a little bit separate from everyone else. So it kind of segments off the group, but also builds cohesion for everyone involved. And I've seen students really, really thrive on this from this strategy, especially, I can't even say especially who, because I think everyone has benefited in their own way. I've seen students really come out of their shell and really get involved with the lunch bunch over time. And we've also really crafted the lunch bunch around a student's interests sometimes to really help them get comfortable with the setting, especially if it's really new for them and they don't really know the peers at all. And I've also seen peer networks work really well with students across the spectrum, across settings that they're in every day, from gen ed settings to self-contained classroom settings. This is kind of a nice one to do the trick there. And then peer supports, I think of this one kind of built into the classroom. So it's more of a framework to use within a classroom setting. And this is more of a social and academic support type of peer strategy here. They're commonly held in classrooms where group work is more commonplace, and also classes like PE where students who need a little bit more supports can just come into the class and peers can come in and be more involved and help them prepare for various things. So I've seen students with autism who are in the self-contained setting go to gym, and their peers will come in and work with them there. So it's not like their PE time, but it is the students with autism PE time, and they'll get ready for Special Olympics or something like that. I've also seen the flip of that, where it's the peers time in PE and the self-contained students will come in and spend time in there too, and they'll do stuff together. So that's a very specific example of using peer supports for the self-contained type of setting. But as I mentioned, group work is fairly commonplace in gen ed settings. So this is such a great way, if you as a gen ed teacher or you're supporting a gen ed teacher, to think about ways to build social skills or build interactions and positive, meaningful interactions for students on the autism spectrum who are a little bit quieter in class or need a little bit more support and time with their peers. You can think about assigning peers and groups with them. Those have been really meaningful and beneficial for everyone too. So now let's get into some tips to implementing peer strategies so that everyone benefits. PMII, or peer strategies, can be used to address a variety of needs and goals, including teaching peers without disabilities ways that they can interact with their peers with disabilities and autism, and just overall others who are different from them. Anyone and everyone can really benefit from that experience. It allows you to increase opportunities for individuals on the autism spectrum to interact with their peers, especially if they are in settings where they are mostly with peers with disabilities or with autism. It's a really nice spot to really get people more engaged with autism, awareness and acceptance in your school, and it could really make an impact on the culture of your school too. I've seen it do wonders in high school settings, especially where everyone is typically so siloed and isolated from one another. It can also help expand social interactions across activities and settings. Can enhance positive and meaningful social interactions between everyone. And then also a big one, it can minimize teacher and adult support. So especially for like peer support type of things, as a gen ed teacher, you may really benefit from peer supports because you're not always having to prompt your student to really interact and engage in a task because their peer may be doing it with them, or their peer is maybe modeling that activity and being more taken to do that too. For peer networks, like pushing into electives can be really helpful for paraprofessionals and other teachers involved to make this a successful experience, and it can really reinforce the process of pushing into other settings and other electives and really make that experience beneficial for everybody, especially since, peers are really cool and teachers and other staff members, paraprofessionals, they're not super cool. I'm sorry. I'm there with you. I understand. But, you can remember back in high school, like, your peers are, like, a lot more cooler than spending all day with your teachers. So it could actually be quite motivating to spend time in. And then lastly, it can facilitate participation and engagement in activities. So that's really what I mean too. Like, seeing your peer do laps around the track can be actually a little bit more motivating than you as a teacher be like, come on, walk with me. It was one time I remember watching that happen when I was doing an observation. It was the best. It was really funny. Of course, the teacher was just like, they took that moment in stride, and they were also pretty thankful because they were like, yes, the student is actually building a bond with their peers and making friends in that class, in that setting. Awesome. And then lastly, I also want to talk about ways to generalize peer strategies across settings. So I don't think I've mentioned this before, but the evidence-based practices, the 27 of them that the MPDC outlined, they only identify them as they did like this whole systematic review identifying these practices, but they only, like, their search is only from early childhood to age 22, where special education supports end. So I know these strategies and many other of the evidence-based practices have been used in adulthood, but their research kind of ends at 22. So if you are using any of these peer strategies for adults, I'd love to hear about them. Like, let me know. You can email me or you can tell me in our Facebook group. I'm going to do a little bit of research after this to see what's out there, and I'll link those in the show notes if I come across any. I'll probably do an episode about those too because I'm really curious about them, and I think adults on the autism spectrum could also really benefit from peer strategies, especially like in the workplace and day programs. Yeah, especially like in the community. Yeah, I'm just excited about it. And I'm like struck that I hadn't done the research yet on that, but you bet I will definitely be doing that. But yes, so all of these peer strategies have been used in school settings, but personally and with students I've worked with in schools, lots of teachers have found a way to have some of these extracurricular activities within the peer networks be something that extends past the school day. So they may meet after school as an activity, but there's like even a program here in North Carolina, I'm not sure how widespread it is, it's called Project Unity, and it has peers working with students in the self-contained setting, or I think it's mostly students in the self-contained setting. Like, they're partnered with them and they meet sometime during the school day, and then they also do community activities. So they go out and do hikes and go to different events out in the community. I was trying to remember some of the ones my brothers did, but they joined in with one of the larger programs called, they were on a bowling team and they would go bowling every Sunday, and it was kind of like Special Olympics, but a little bit more, it was definitely more peer facilitated, which is really cool. And they had a really cool name. They were called the Incredibolers, and I appreciate that pun. I really do. And I appreciate that team. It was such a great experience. And so that's a great example of how peer networks have been included and involved in the community setting. I would encourage you as teachers and parents who are listening right now, and other professionals who are listening, to think about ways to incorporate peer strategies in the community and at home, any other setting, really. I think there's such a great way to embed these ideas and strategies, because ultimately at the core of peer strategies is you're pairing a peer with the individual on the autism spectrum to spend time together in a positive way, positive social interactions. And so you're being selective about peers who really match well with your student or your child or client. You can help facilitate those interactions and then fade out, and that's ultimately the practice of a peer network. Also, I think peer supports would be amazing in a college setting. Just an idea. I'm going to look into that too. But yeah, so that is it from me today. To keep this conversation going, please join us in our free Facebook group. It's called Autism Grown Up. You can find us on Facebook. You can just search us up right there, Autism Grown Up. Or you can go to our website, autismgrownup.com, and there is a community tab that you can click on. All right, I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. For show notes, resources from this episode, and more free help with adulthood, head over to our website at autismgrownup.com/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, help others find us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts apps or by sharing the show with a friend. We'll be back next week with even more Autism Grown Up topics. Hey, one more thing. Whether you are an autistic adult, family member, or professional, I've got some workshops, curated blog reading lists, downloadable tools, and many other resources to help you and the autistic adult in your life prepare and get a job, prepare for college, navigate the adult service system, and figure out adulting. These are all the things that I've found in my research and working with families and professionals that will help you succeed in adulthood. So if you are ready to create a successful adulthood experience, you can text the letters AGU to 555-888, and you can get immediate access to our adulthood starter kits. Check this out. Share this with your friends. I would love to hear from you and what's helping, how you're using it, how's it going. You can also follow up with that same number again to get in contact with me. Again, if you text the letters A like autism, G like grown, and U like up to 555-888.